The Zarnethi were not prepared. They had studied Earth for nearly 2 solar rotations. They understood gravity. They understood combustion engines. They even tolerated TikTok. But there was one thing they had failed to grasp: sarcasm. It began with a memo from the High Interpretive Council aboard the Zarnethi research vessel Curiosity Shard, orbiting safely in the thermosphere above Earth. The memo was short and urgent. Subject Alpha 29 humanity demonstrates irregular linguistic behavior, term classified as sarcasm. All attempts to parse tone, intent, and impact have resulted in logical inconsistency and emotional damage. Full study required. Volunteers will be appreciated. Lorak, chief xenolinguist of the Curiosity Shard, accepted the mission. He was tall by Zarnethi standards, his chitinous skin dark and lined with translator nodes. He had studied 12 languages across 4 systems. He had once negotiated peace between 2 gas giants by diagramming comparative poetry. He was confident. His assistants were not. "There is something wrong with human speech," said Tikvik, his younger aide, reviewing the latest data from a New Jersey high school cafeteria. "None of this makes sense. A female tells another she loves her dress. 5 seconds later, they engage in a physical altercation." "That is the challenge," Lorak replied. "Sarcasm appears to be praise disguised as insult, or insult disguised as praise. It is in essence a linguistic predator." The team nodded solemnly. The mission was clear. Understand sarcasm, survive it, and maybe one day use it. Their first subject was a podcast host named Brad Simmons. He was selected for his extensive use of irony, layered vocal tone, and consistent lack of sincerity. The Zarnethi watched from a hidden orbital pod, connected to Earth internet through a piggybacked satellite line. They listened to his latest broadcast. "Oh sure, like that worked out great. You know what I love? When the power goes out right in the middle of cooking a frozen pizza. Perfect timing, universe. Real 5-star experience." Lorak tapped the pause icon. "See? This is a clear case." He expresses appreciation, but what he truly conveys is rage. Tikvik leaned in. "Is this considered polite?" "No, but it is socially acceptable. That is the danger." They observed for 6 more hours. By then, 3 members of the team had suffered mild psychological tremors from trying to map sincerity levels. By the 8th hour, one researcher had filed an emotional injury report labeled "Subject Sarcasm Ratio Exceeding Safety Thresholds. Intent Unclear. Confidence Collapsed." Lorak was intrigued. Humans appeared to weaponize tone, not with physical harm, but with existential confusion. Tikvik nodded, twitching nervously. "They call each other genius when someone is clearly a fool. They say, 'Great job,' when something explodes. Their words are venom in silk." "Fascinating," Lorak whispered. The real breakthrough came when they studied a group chat. This digital hive mind communication, known as texting, was a breeding ground for passive aggression. Screenshots revealed lines like, "Thanks a lot, Jerry, you really helped. Nice of you to show up on time, like always. Oh, don't worry, we'll all just wait here. Not like we have lives." The Zarnethi didn't understand. They cross-referenced the words, positive, the intent, negative. The social consequences, devastating. "How do humans survive this?" one assistant cried. "They don't," said Tikvik grimly. "They pretend to. That is the most sarcastic act of all." Lorak decided it was time to test their understanding. He would engage with humans directly. Not in person yet, that would be dangerous, but through anonymous internet forums, using what they had learned. He typed his first sentence on a human message board known for hostile debate. "Oh yeah, 'cause you're definitely the expert on rocket science. I bow to your infinite wisdom, random guy with 12 typos." He hit send. Responses flooded in. "Dude, chill. LOL, someone got roasted. This man's spine made of tungsten." The Zarnethi cheered. Lorak leaned back. It worked. "They think we are one of them." He had no idea what LOL meant, but it was repeated often. He took it as approval. Tikvik blinked rapidly. So now we mimic them further? Correct. We study how they use sarcasm in physical space. We must understand when it causes laughter and when it causes war. Their first field test was a wedding in Ohio. Lorak and Tikvik, disguised as humans using adaptive bioskin suits, attended in the back row. They spoke little, mostly observed. The ceremony was calm, until the best man took the mic. You know, when Dave told me he was getting married, I said, wow, that poor woman, but really, I just want to say, nice job. Genius. You locked it down before she got her eyesight checked. Lorak's brow segments furrowed. Is that a threat? He whispered. Tikvik looked pale. He's insulting the groom during the sacred bond ceremony. Is this their custom? I believe it is mockery masked as praise, a form of dominance ritual. They recorded it all. The smiles, the laughter, the slight flinch from the bride's father. Later, in the reception hall, Lorak attempted a sarcastic compliment to blend in. He walked up to a woman holding a glass of champagne and said, "Oh, wonderful, more drinks, because that's exactly what this group needs. Fantastic judgment, truly?" She blinked. "Excuse me? I am joking with sarcasm." She slapped him with a shrimp cocktail. Tikvik pulled Lorak aside. "You just insulted her. Publicly. I thought she would appreciate the tone." He did not. They were thrown out. The Zarnethi were discouraged but not defeated. Back aboard the Curiosity Shard, they regrouped. They analyzed patterns, compared outcomes, played hours of human sitcoms labeled The Office and Parks and Recreation, which were considered sarcasm-rich environments. Tikvik made a grim announcement. The data shows a correlation between sarcastic density and emotional instability. The higher the sarcasm, the more likely humans are to cry in their rooms, alone. Lorak frowned. So, it is not merely a form of humor. It is a shield and a weapon. They fell into silence. For the first time in his career, Lorak questioned whether decoding a species was worth it. Perhaps some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. But then a broadcast came through, an interview clip of a stand-up comedian named Kyle Masters. He said, "Sarcasm is like throwing knives in a pillow fight. Everyone's laughing until someone's bleeding. But hey, you can always say I was just kidding. Makes it all better." Lorak stood up straight. "That is the answer," he said. "It is plausible deniability. Sarcasm is the art of attacking without being attacked." He looked around at his exhausted team. "We are going to learn this, perfect it, and maybe one day, return it." Tikvik swallowed. "You mean, use it on humans?" "No," Lorak said, eyes burning with purpose. "Worse, use it with them, at their level." They were not prepared. But they would be. Lorak called it Phase 2, integration through emulation. Tikvik called it the worst idea since Earth salsa dancing. Either way, it was happening. After the disastrous wedding incident and shrimp-based assault, the Zarnethi linguistics team had decided that merely observing sarcasm wasn't enough. If they were to understand it, they had to speak it, fluently, casually, dangerously. They would go undercover, pose as Earth students at a liberal arts college in Colorado, a place chosen for its sarcasm density and general lack of critical security infrastructure. The team assumed new identities. Lorak became Professor Lenny Rowe, a visiting academic from Canada. Tikvik became Tim. No one asked questions. The first test was a classroom setting. Lorak stood before 20 students in a Philosophy 101 course and introduced himself. "Hello, I am Professor Rowe. I will be teaching you how to question existence by making statements that sound profound but mean absolutely nothing." A girl in the back smirked. "So, basically, you're perfect for this class." The students laughed. Lorak's translator clicked. "She insulted my qualifications." "That's a compliment," whispered Tikvik, scribbling rapidly. "She is validating your sarcasm by responding in kind." Lorak smiled stiffly. "Ah, yes, thank you. You are clearly an expert in intellectual humility. The girl narrowed her eyes. Okay then. A beat of silence passed. Then another student muttered, Dude just called her dumb with a smile. The class erupted. Lorak logged the moment. Public sarcasm exchange resulted in increased social status. Mild aggression met with amusement. No casualties. Ogret. Outside the classroom, the Zarnethi continued testing. At the campus coffee shop, Tikvik ordered a latte and attempted sarcasm with the barista. Wow, great, another drink made entirely out of steamed disappointment. What a treat. The barista stared. You? Want whipped cream? Yes, and a side of your barely restrained contempt. The barista handed him the cup and walked away slowly. Tikvik turned to Lorak. I think I nailed it. You may have permanently damaged his self-esteem. I consider that a successful field application. Lorak was less sure. Later that week, the linguistics team attended a party at an off-campus apartment. It was full of students speaking over music, tossing red plastic cups around, and throwing sarcasm like knives at a juggling convention. Oh wow, you showed up. Didn't think you'd survive daylight. Love the outfit, bold choice for someone with your bone structure. Nice hair. What's your stylist's name? Regret? The Zarnethi were mesmerized. It wasn't just conversation, it was combat, masked in flirtation, affection delivered through precision strikes. Lorak attempted to participate. He walked up to a young man in a neon vest and said, Fascinating garments. You appear to have escaped a construction site. The man raised an eyebrow. At least I look like I'm doing something. Lorak fired back, yes, failing upward. The crowd around them gasped. Then they laughed. The man nodded. Okay, respect. Tikvik was overwhelmed. You dueled him verbally and emerged victorious. That was an actual burn. Lorak exhaled. I believe we have reached fluency. But fluency came at a cost. Back on the ship, the other scientists began to exhibit symptoms, mental fatigue, identity confusion. One assistant, Jarnik, walked into the lab and announced, Oh, great, another thrilling day of analyzing passive-aggressive jabbering, just what I always dreamed of. No one responded. He blinked. Oh no, he whispered, it's spreading. The real disaster began at the diplomatic summit. Lorak and Tikvik were invited to represent their findings at the Coalition's Intercultural Exchange Forum. Dozens of species were present, some aquatic, some gaseous, most extremely sensitive to insult. Lorak's job was simple, deliver a short speech on linguistic adaptation. He began, Ladies, beings and semi-entities, we of the Zarnethi have studied human sarcasm. It is not merely speech. It is war in a tuxedo, praise loaded with malice, smiles that bite. And yet, we have come to love it. The crowd murmured. Therefore, Lorak continued, we believe sarcasm is a legitimate form of diplomacy. For example, allow me to compliment our honored host, Supreme Arbitrator Bixlin of the Relathi Empire. He turned. Your coordination of this event has truly impressed us all. A logistical masterpiece. One could hardly believe it was organized by someone with the strategic awareness of a melting sponge. Dead silence. Beepslin, who had no sarcasm protocols in his cognitive filters, stared in horror. His antenna turned black. His assistants rose in alarm. Lorak smiled proudly. Tikvik leaned over. He thinks you called him a sponge. I did. You weren't supposed to actually do that? Emergency protocol was triggered. Lorak and Tikvik were removed by security drones before the first plasma warning shot hit the wall behind them. 2 hours later, back on Curiosity Shard, a message came in from Earth. It was from Brad Simmons, the podcast host. He had seen the summit footage on a leaked broadcast and posted a reaction. So, aliens studied sarcasm for like 5 minutes and immediately started intergalactic beef? Love that for us. Nice job, genius. The message was short. but it hit Lorak harder than a tractor beam to the forehead. He turned away from the screen. We've underestimated the humans again. Tikvik nodded. Their sarcasm has evolved beyond casual use. It is a cultural immune system, an emotional defense shield, and we poked it. Lorak exhaled slowly. We're not ready, but we're close, said Tikvik. They stood in silence. And then the room's comms chimed with a message from the High Interpretive Council. We heard about the diplomatic firestorm. Very smooth, really top-notch work. Couldn't be prouder. Lorak blinked. Are they mocking us? Tikvik paused. It's hard to tell. Lorak sat down and buried his face in his hands. We are being sarcastic by our own kind. Lorak spent the next 2 Earth days hiding in the cargo hold of Curiosity Shard, rewatching the summit footage in complete silence. Strategic awareness of a melting sponge, he whispered again, voice hollow. I called a galactic dignitary a sponge, to his face, on camera. Tikvik stood outside the chamber door, holding a tray of hydration gel and a bottle of Earth hot sauce, which Lorak had taken a liking to ever since developing a strange affection for human punishment-based food. Lorak, Tikvik called gently. We've been invited to a human comedy panel. Silence. They say it's a roast. Lorak cracked the door open. His eyes were wide. They roast people alive? No, Tikvik said. Not literally. Then what is a roast? The answer came 3 days later in downtown Los Angeles, inside a comedy club packed wall-to-wall with humans wearing expressions that ranged from giddy anticipation to mild intoxication. The sign above the stage read, Roast of Councilwoman Becca Lane. No mercy, no apologies. Lorak and Tikvik were seated near the front, disguised in their human biosuits. Tikvik clutched a notepad. Lorak gripped the edge of his chair like a man expecting a sniper. The host took the stage. All right, folks, let's give it up for Councilwoman Becca Lane, the only politician with a 5-star Uber rating and a 1-star marriage. The room exploded with laughter. Lorak turned slowly to Tikvik. He insulted her life decisions. Why is everyone applauding? It is a ceremonial sacrifice, Tikvik whispered. The subject allows themselves to be verbally slaughtered as a show of status and humility, a social paradox. More jokes followed. Becca's so fake even her shadow left. She's done more damage to city infrastructure than a natural disaster on roller skates. If sarcasm were currency, she'd finally balance the budget. Lorak's translator overheated. By the time Becca took the stage herself and returned fire with brutal grace, Lorak was shaking. She thanked them, he murmured. They mocked her, and she thanked them. Tikvik was already writing. Observation. Sarcasm used here not to attack, but to bond. The target is pre-approved. The burns are expected. The laughter is permission. Lorak stood up in the middle of the roast. I must try. Tikvik grabbed his sleeve. Wait, no, we haven't mapped the safe zones. But Lorak was already climbing the stage steps. The microphone hissed as he leaned in. I am an alien, literally, and I am here tonight to roast Councilwoman Becca Lane. Please remember, I only recently learned how to use this language, and by use, I mean desecrate. The audience chuckled. Encouraged, Lorak continued. Becca, your leadership has been breathtaking. Like stepping into a poorly ventilated room. The laugh was louder. He pressed forward. You make hard decisions, like whether to answer emails or pretend your Wi-Fi's down. You are a shining example of how far mediocrity can climb when it wears good shoes. The room exploded. Becca herself laughed so hard she spilled her drink. Lorak stepped down. For the first time since the summit disaster, he smiled. I have found the fire, he whispered to Tikvik, and I am still standing. Back on Curiosity Shard, morale soared. The roast footage went viral across 8 systems. The Zarnethi were praised for Finally, understanding human diplomacy. Lorak was invited to Earth's National Humor Council as a guest flame wielder. Even the High Interpretive Council sent a second message. Nice work at the roast. Who knew you had it in you? Real trailblazer. Such great timing on your last joke. Lorak stared at the message for a full minute. Do you think they mean that? Tikvik shrugged. I've stopped guessing. They turned to the latest Earth update, a conference scheduled in Washington, D.C. called United Worlds Communication Symposium. It would be broadcast live. Every Earth nation, multiple alien species, a chance for cultural healing. Lorak was chosen to speak. The topic? Bridging galactic misunderstandings through humor and honesty. He prepared for weeks. He practiced delivery, pace, inflection, facial tension. He watched thousands of human YouTube clips. He studied every line from George Carlin, John Mulaney, and even that one guy who posted dark sarcasm on Twitter and was banned 14 times. But when he finally stepped on stage in front of world leaders, soldiers, and alien observers, he blanked. The pressure was too real. He cleared his throat. Good evening. I'm here to address a matter that nearly triggered a diplomatic conflict and an interstellar roast. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Human sarcasm is not what we thought. It is not a virus, it is a language, one of survival, of protest, of comedy, so sharp it leaves emotional scar tissue. People nodded. He relaxed. We came to Earth thinking you were hostile. You said, "Oh, great," and rolled your eyes, and we thought you were declaring war. But you weren't. You were just dealing with the printer not working for the 6th time. We understand now. That was not aggression, that was culture. The applause began. He held up a hand. And on behalf of the Zarnethi, I would like to offer a formal apology for the sponge comment. Doubtful laughter. Though in fairness, Lorak added with a straight face, he did resemble one. The crowd lost it. Lorak bowed. It was done. He had not only decoded sarcasm, he had survived it. 6 months after Lorak's triumphant speech in Washington, sarcasm was officially listed in the Galactic Coalition's Cultural Registry as a Tier 2 linguistic hazard. It was now taught to diplomats alongside cautionary tales like smiling at a Brezhnev counts as a marriage proposal and never point at a Silurian's forehead unless you want a duel. The Zarnethi, once a species of pristine scholars and logic-driven negotiators, had changed. Their comms channels were filled with ironic banter. Their scientific reports occasionally included phrases like, "Oh, wow, another anomaly, how refreshing," in footnotes. And their leadership? The High Interpretive Council now held quarterly roast forums where officials took turns mocking each other in a controlled environment. Lorak was named the honorary host of Verbal Fire, but he didn't let it go to his head. Mostly because his assistant, Tikvik, printed the title on a coffee mug and then gave it to him with a smirk and the words, "Because you're so humble." That mug became famous across 8 star systems. Meanwhile, humanity was having its own sarcastic renaissance. People loved the aliens who had once tried to study them like bugs, but now posted passive-aggressive memes on social media. Zarnethi ambassadors were suddenly regulars on Earth talk shows. Tikvik even got a segment on late-night TV called Tim's Take, where he read political tweets and responded with devastating one-liners. One clip, where Tikvik tilted his head and said yes because nothing says fiscal responsibility like buying a submarine for a desert country, got 300 million views. Lorak didn't enjoy the spotlight. He preferred the background, the quiet hours, the archives. But Earth had a way of pulling him back in. The final test came unexpectedly. Lorak was invited to attend a high-level peace summit between 2 rival planetary factions, the Lenthari and the Erevan, who had been on the brink of war for over a decade. Earth was acting as a neutral ground with human mediators. At the head of the delegation was a woman named Diana Cruz, known for her no-nonsense attitude, sharp tongue, and ability to defuse tension with 10 words or less. Lorak met her in the UN Tower in New York. She extended a hand, gave him a grin, and said, "So, you're the bug who turned galactic diplomacy into open mic night." Lorak blinked. "That is correct." "You're welcome." She turned and walked away. Tikvik leaned in and whispered, "I can't tell if she insulted you or complimented you." "That's how you know it worked," Lorak replied. The talks began tense. The Lenthari accused the Erovan of territorial surveillance. The Erovan accused the Lenthari of weaponizing gravity pulses near disputed zones. Neither would back down. Then came a turning point. The Lenthari ambassador, eyes glowing with frustration, muttered, "I suppose next you'll blame us for the weather, too." Before the Erevan could respond, Diana Cruz leaned in, smiling sweetly. "Well, if the forecast says passive-aggressive with a 90% chance of denial, I'd say that tracks." The room paused. The Erovan ambassador chuckled. The Lenthari hissed out a laugh. Something shifted. For the next hour, Lorak watched Sarcasm smooth out spikes in tension, ease up the grip of pride, and create just enough space for compromise. The humans weren't mocking. They were disarming. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about venting pressure through sharpness, making disagreement bearable. Sarcasm, in its most evolved form, was empathy dressed like a punk. By the end of the summit, the Lenthari agreed to stand down their border fleets. The Erovan agreed to share long-range scan data. And Diana Cruz, walking out of the room, turned to Lorak and said, "Not bad for a guy who once insulted a dignitary with the grace of a dropped pie." Lorak bowed slightly. "I am learning from the best." Back on Curiosity Shard, Lorak compiled the final entry in their study. Sarcasm, final observance. Not a glitch in communication, a feature. Not a weapon of war, a scalpel for social surgery. Dangerous in untrained hands. Capable of piercing ego, softening conflict, and lighting rooms on fire. Best handled with care, confidence, and caffeine. He added a personal note at the bottom. "We came to understand it. Instead, it reshaped us." Sarcasm taught us not just how to speak like humans, but how to be among them. It is not merely tone. It is survival through smirk. As a final gesture, Lorak created a hollow compilation titled Earth's Sharpest Tongue, a documentary chronicling humanity's greatest sarcastic burns, aired across 5 galaxies. It opened with a voiceover. "They came to mock us. They stayed to get mocked back. And now they wield our sharpest gift." Clips of human icons followed. Late-night hosts, grumpy dads, Twitter accounts run by pizza chains, and, of course, the moment Lorak himself insulted a planetary diplomat and lived to tell the tale. The documentary closed with a simple quote from Lorak. "Sarcasm is the last true universal language. Because every species understands what it means to say something and mean the opposite, especially when it hurts." In his quarters, Lorak stared out at the stars. Tikvik walked in, holding 2 mugs of hydration gel. "More glory today," he said. "The documentary broke viewing records." Lorak took the mug. "Wonderful. Now I can live knowing we're famous for being snarky." Tikvik raised his glass. "To being misinterpreted by half the galaxy." Lorak raised his in return. "And perfectly understood by the other half." They clinked glasses. In the darkness of space, where war once brewed and diplomacy had failed for centuries, something sharp had finally cut through. It wasn't a weapon, but it wasn't a treaty. It was just a voice saying, "Oh, great, more emotional complexity, just what we needed," and meaning every word.